Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're someone who really wants to understand the levers, the things that control human action,
Okay.
it's like what makes us decide to endure something difficult for years, or maybe dedicate our whole lives to just one big goal, then today's dive is definitely for you. It's essential listening. We're opening up a really fascinating stack of sources today, and they all deal with one central, pretty profound idea: the subjective forces that drive us, our deepest motivations. They can be intentionally directed, they can be refined, and maybe most importantly, they can be manipulated.
Yeah, this is a deep one. We're really excavating the architecture of human will itself here. Our core mission today isn't just about defining motivation, though. It's about getting into the psychological stuff, the sociological mechanisms behind how we humans establish purpose, and maybe more critically, how the perception of meaning, like the qualitative assessment, the value we place on things, how that can be strategically engineered to influence or maybe even fundamentally control our long-term goals.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. Because our sources, they draw a really sharp line between two concepts we often just, lump together: purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
And getting this distinction right, that seems like the key that unlocks everything else we're going to talk about
It
today.
really is.
So purpose is objective, right? It's the destination,
Yeah.
the long-term aim. It's the what.
Exactly. The what. So if you say, okay, my goal is to spend the next 4 years getting this specific degree, or I want to build a successful company, those are definable objective destinations. That's the purpose.
Got it.
Meaning, though, that's total different. It's subjective. It's the value, the significance, the emotional resonance you attach to that destination. It's the why and, crucially, the how it feels while you're pursuing it.
Right. And the analogy our source material uses is, I think, perfect here. Purpose is like the address you type into your GPS.
Yeah.
Meaning is the subjective fuel. It's the belief, the emotional commitment, the thing that makes the whole journey,
Mm-hmm.
especially, when you hit roadblocks or things get tough, the thing that makes it feel worthwhile.
Exactly. So if your purpose is, say, starting that business, the meaning might be the significance you find in creating something new, or maybe the personal freedom you get from being your own boss.
And that's the lever. That's what we're looking at today. How does changing that subjective feeling, how you feel about the goal, the story you tell yourself about why it matters, how does that profoundly change the motivational value of the objective purpose itself?
It's fundamental. If
Yeah.
you can control that narrative of meaning, you basically gain huge control over commitment, over resilience, over output. The works.
Okay. So let's dive into section 1 then. Looking at these core dynamics, purpose and meaning. We should probably start with motivation itself.
Right. Motivation is simply the propellant. It's just the force that compels us, any organism really, to move toward an objective purpose. Psychologically, what we see, what the research shows, is that manipulating the perception of meaning attached to any purpose, it directly influences the commitment that results, the resilience needed to push through setbacks, and the overall motivational currency someone places on actually achieving that purpose.
So, putting it simply, if the goal feels more valuable subjectively,
Yeah,
then the individual's internal kind of cost-benefit calculation changes.
absolutely.
They're willing to spend more energy, push through more psychological discomfort, maybe endure greater complexity to get there.
It's like optimizing human energy in
Yeah.
a way. But, and this is important before we dive into the, let's say, darker uses, the sources are really clear that this mechanism, this manipulation of meaning, it's not inherently bad or nefarious.
Okay, that's a crucial point. It's not always deceptive.
Not at all. Actually, changing the narrative of meaning is a core part of effective leadership. It's central to successful therapy. It's key to any real self-improvement effort. Think about a physical therapist helping someone recover from a really bad injury.
Yep.
The purpose is clear: recovery, physical recovery. But the meaning attached to that process, initially, it might just be pain and limitation.
Yeah, and if you only focus on the pain, motivation just tanks, right?
Precisely. So a good therapist, what do? They constructively manipulate the meaning. They reframe that daily struggle. It's not about limitation anymore. It's reframed as the active, quantifiable reassertion of control over your own body.
Shifting the focus.
Exactly. They shift the meaning towards strength, persistence, self-mastery. Now, the purpose rehabilitation, it hasn't changed, but the subjective fuel, the meaning, it's transformed from something dreaded into an empowering challenge.
Or, like you mentioned, in effective leadership. Say a manager is navigating a really tough company restructuring. The purpose is technical. We have to streamline these departments. That's the what.
Right.
But the meaning for the people involved could be really low. Like, oh, great, I might be firing my friends.
A terrible feeling, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where a leader steps in. They reframe the meaning. It's not just about cutting jobs. It's about, we're doing this to ensure the survival of the whole organization so that we can continue to serve our community, maybe provide jobs for the next 20 years.
That reframing gives it a higher purpose, a different kind of weight.
It becomes the engine of organizational resilience. It lets the team internalize the difficulty, manage that cognitive dissonance, and push through a really unpleasant purpose because it's now attached to a high-value meaning. Survival, legacy, maybe community contribution.
So understanding that this mechanism is a universal tool, it's used for good, for constructive development, just as much as it can be used for control. That's essential before we look at the coercive side.
Absolutely. It shows us the underlying vulnerability isn't that we're just easily fooled. It's inherent to the human search for significance itself.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
The vulnerability isn't really that we're gullible, maybe, but that we're just wired to seek significance. And if we don't supply our own meaning, well, external forces are often quite happy to supply one for us.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
Okay, so let's pivot then, section 2. Focusing on these constructive uses. How is this psychological principle used effectively and ethically to boost personal commitment, improve outcomes? We're looking at specific techniques here, right?
Right. Technique 1 is basically reframing the why. It's about fundamentally changing the emotional narrative that's attached to a purpose. We need to remember that intrinsic motivation, that drive coming from within, it's always way more sustainable than extrinsic motivation, like rewards or punishments.
Money only motivates so much or for so long.
Exactly. So reframing the narrative is often about shifting a task from an extrinsic driver, like, I do this just for the paycheck, to an intrinsic one, something like, I do this because it actually aligns with my core values.
Let's use that industrial example again, because the sources really highlight this one well. Think about a really repetitive job, maybe on a production line, high volume.
Yeah.
The immediate purpose is defined very narrowly. Assemble these parts, put A into B.
Right. And the meaning you derive from that physical action often is just monotony. It leads to burnout, poor quality work. So the key is to lift the worker's gaze, get them to see beyond the immediate physical action. Contract that simple purpose, assemble parts with a reframed meaning, like, wait, we're building life-saving medical equipment here, stuff that will help people in ICUs all over the world.
Wow, okay. That's a huge shift in perspective.
It's a tectonic shift in the narrative. Suddenly, the act of putting component A into slot B, it's not just about compliance to get paid anymore, it becomes an act of public service almost. The emotional narrative now emphasizes a really resonant humanitarian outcome, potentially saving someone's life.
And you actually see the results of that shift.
Oh, absolutely. We see measurable effects. That tedious task, tightening a bolt, whatever it is, it's now mentally linked to a powerful emotional motivator. Research shows this shift boosts the intrinsic value of the work, and that translates directly into better results. Higher employee engagement, much lower turnover, even a measurable increase in quality control, because the workers start self-policing their own work. It feels like a direct ethical contribution now.
So the physical purpose, the what, didn't change at all.
Not one bit, but the subjective fuel, the meaning, radically different.
Okay, that leads us nicely into technique 2, connecting the purpose to innate values. This seems like maybe the most powerful long-term constructive tool, because it grounds the motivation in something that's already fundamental to the person.
I think so, yes. Humans have this deep set of innate values, things we just seem to need. Authenticity, creativity, community, mastery, connection to family. External drivers, things like money, fame, even short-term goals like changing your appearance.
Yeah.
They tend to be pretty fleeting motivators.
They burn out quickly.
They do. But linking a purpose to an innate value, that can create almost unlimited internal drive.
Let's use that example of struggling with exercise again. The purpose, just losing weight, often feels shallow, right? It might be driven by external pressures, social media, what other people think.
Yeah, extrinsic stuff. And so when the process gets hard, when it hurts or you're tired, the motivation often fails because that extrinsic reward, looking a certain way, it's just not compelling enough to overcome the intrinsic cost, the physical pain, the effort.
Makes sense.
But if that person manages to successfully reframe the meaning, if they start thinking, okay, I am rigorously committing to this difficult process because I'm taking care of my body, so I can be present and healthy for my family, so I can make sure I see my grandkids grow up.
Okay. Now the purpose isn't just about a number on a scale anymore.
Exactly. It's anchored to a deeply compelling innate value: family preservation, connection, protection.
And that anchoring must give it incredible motivational staying power.
Immense longevity, yeah. So when that person faces the temptation to skip a workout or eat junk food, the internal voice isn't just saying, oh, you'll gain weight. It's saying something much more powerful, like, you are jeopardizing the health you need to fulfill your fundamental duty to your family.
That's a different level of motivation.
It's tied to survival, to core identity. It's far more powerful than chasing short-term comfort. So the purpose, the exercise routine, gets sustained through pain and setbacks because the ultimate value driving it feels immutable. Okay. And then finally, technique 3, creating a sense of legacy. This taps into that human need for transcendence, right? The desire for our efforts to mean something beyond our own lifespan.
Exactly. Legacy provides meaning through contribution that sort of projects far into the future. When we feel like what we're doing now will have ripples, will affect future generations, it inspires a kind of dedication that immediate personal satisfaction just can't usually match. You see this mechanism leveraged a lot by founders of nonprofits or maybe academics who create whole new fields of study. Or often you see it in long-standing family business owners.
Right. Imagine a business owner who isn't just driven by the next quarterly profit report. That's a purely transactional purpose.
Very short term, yeah.
But maybe they're motivated by the meaning of building a stable company, one that provides, say, 50 or 100 steady jobs for their community, ensuring local economic stability for generations. They see their company as more like an institution supporting the community.
And that legacy-driven meaning completely changes their risk tolerance, their dedication level. They're not just building a balance sheet. They feel like they're building a monument to stability and continuity. That transcendent meaning inspires incredible perseverance, resilience through recessions, market volatility, all of it. The psychological payoff is huge. They've achieved, in a sense, a kind of immortality through their work.
So in all these constructive examples, the goal is really about aligning the purpose with the individual's authentic, innate values.
That's the core of it, amplifying their internal energy by making the why deeply personal and meaningful.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly then. We get it now. Meaning is the engine. Reframing the narrative is the mechanism to fuel that engine now.
Yeah.
We have to make the transition because the very same psychological mechanisms, that universal human need for significance, for transcendence, that's exactly what makes us vulnerable to strategic control on a much larger societal scale.
Mm-hmm.
So we're shifting now from personal growth and good leadership to the manipulation of meaning by elites.
The jump is sharp, but you're right, the tool is identical. In personal growth, you manipulate meaning to serve the individual's authentic purpose. In elite manipulation, you manipulate meaning to serve the elite's purpose, often directly at the individual's expense.
And the sources point very clearly to historical examples here, particularly the systematic use of organized religion by entrenched elites. Whether that's the clergy themselves or monarchs or political figures who are leveraging spiritual authority, using it to manipulate meaning and direct the long-term purposes of entire populations, really, for their own benefit.
Yeah, and what's truly, you could say, insidious about this control mechanism is just how efficient it is. Elites using this don't have to rely on expensive, error-prone military force all the time or constant overt physical coercion. It's much subtler.
How do they do it then?
They achieve control by controlling the source code, so to speak. They control the narrative, the interpretation of core philosophical or religious doctrines. So, by defining what gets perceived as purposeful and meaningful within a community, they gain immense psychological control over commitment and behavior.
It's a strategy of pure leverage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Define the why, that profound subjective meaning, so you can then unilaterally direct the purpose towards outcomes that overwhelmingly, disproportionately serve the elite's interests.
Exactly. It's a remarkable form of labor delegation. The followers enthusiastically perform the necessary work, build the pyramids, fight the wars, all while genuinely believing they are serving some divine higher power or fulfilling their own ultimate purpose.
So let's break down the tactics. The first one you mentioned is promising otherworldly rewards.
Yes. This is the classic, the ultimate strategic deferral of gratification. You basically move the reward entirely outside the temporal, verifiable realm into the afterlife.
So the whole purpose of earthly life gets redefined.
Completely. It's reframed entirely around pursuing spiritual salvation, guaranteeing a place in heaven, achieving a better next life, whatever the specific belief system offers.
And the meaning attached to that eternal bliss, ultimate reward, is incredibly powerful.
Immense. And it's used to motivate believers to endure unbelievable hardship, poverty, systematic exploitation in their current earthly life. The logic there preached is deceptively simple, isn't it? Why complain about temporary suffering, just 70 or 80 years of difficulty, when the reward is infinite happiness, eternal transcendence?
It reframes the suffering itself.
Absolutely. The pain, the poverty, the exploitation, it all becomes meaningful. It's imbued with purpose. It's no longer evidence that the system is maybe flawed or unjust. It gets redefined as a test, a spiritual purification process, or maybe a demonstration of spiritual rigor that actually increases your spiritual capital for the next life.
That's a powerful way to manage cognitive dissonance. The peasant is poor.
But they're spiritually wealthy, and their suffering proves it. It becomes a badge of honor in a twisted way.
And the profound inequity here is just glaring. While the masses are motivated to suffer and focus entirely on that spiritual horizon, the elite, the ones interpreting the rules and guaranteeing that future reward, they are conveniently free to accumulate immense tangible material wealth and power right here, right now in this life.
Yes, they effectively privatize the temporal benefits while socializing the spiritual costs onto the followers. And they even justify their accumulation. They claim their temporal power, their palaces, their wealth. It's all necessary to shepherd the masses toward that ultimate spiritual purpose.
We need these resources to guide you to salvation.
Precisely. It's reframed not as personal indulgence, but as the necessary infrastructure required to maintain the stability and the institutions that facilitate the follower's path to the afterlife. Which brings us right to the second tactic, creating a divine mandate, sacred obedience.
Okay, this sounds more political.
It's the political mechanism of control, yes. By claiming a special, exclusive connection, often hereditary to a divine power, elites can portray their own self-serving political or economic goals as a holy mission, something that's just part of the non-negotiable cosmic order.
Like the divine right of kings, that whole idea.
That's the quintessential example, and that manipulation fundamentally transforms the meaning of obedience. It's no longer just a political contract between ruler and ruled, which could potentially be broken or renegotiated. It becomes an unchallengeable sacred duty.
So if a common person is unhappy with, say, high taxes or being drafted into a war,
Their potential dissent is immediately stripped of legitimacy. If you oppose the king, you're not just committing a political act like treason against a mortal ruler. No, you're committing an act against the divine order itself. You're challenging God's will.
that has a chilling effect on any kind of political organization or resistance.
Absolutely. The meaning attached to the hierarchy turns political submission into a non-negotiable moral imperative. The beauty of this system, from the elite's perspective, is how it stabilizes the entire social structure psychologically. It makes dissent seem morally and spiritually wrong. It's a risk that threatens eternal damnation. So why would you risk eternal suffering just to gain maybe slightly more temporary comfort or justice in this short life?
The manipulated meaning just completely skews that cost-benefit analysis.
Dramatically, it ensures the purpose of the common person remains fixed on serving the divinely appointed ruler, rather than seeking any kind of self-determination or change.
Okay, so if we connect all this, the manipulated meaning, these tactics, connect it to the concrete purposes that actually result from it, we see it's incredibly effective. Not just at controlling thought, but at generating specific, very inequitable financial and social outcomes. Outcomes that consistently benefit a select few. And this is section 4, right? Exploring the tangible results of co-opted meaning.
Yes. We can start with outcome A, financial and material exploitation. The sources really highlight how powerful institutions, especially religious ones historically, have basically monetized the promise of salvation, motivating immense financial contributions and labor, often far exceeding what any secular tax code could ever hope to achieve.
That's a key difference, isn't it? Secular taxation relies on enforcement, and it often breeds resentment.
Right. But spiritual taxation, when it's fueled by manipulated meaning, it can generate enthusiastic compliance. People want to give, even during times of extreme personal hardship. The control mechanism is based on these transactions of spiritual capital.
Can we look at specific examples?
Sure. Tithing is a pervasive one. The mandatory giving of a percentage, often 10% of your income to the church. The act of giving itself is rigorously reframed in the narrative. It's not presented as merely an institutional fee or tax. No, it's framed as a spiritual purpose, an act that ensures divine favor or spiritual cleansing or guarantees your place in heaven.
So for a struggling farmer whose whole existence is precarious,
Exactly. For that farmer, this transaction giving away a chunk of his meager income, it's framed as a kind of low-cost insurance policy against eternal disaster. It seems like a rational choice within that belief system.
and then there's the even more notorious historical example, selling indulgences.
Yeah, the forgiveness of sins, literally for a fee. The purchaser's purpose is clear. Immediate spiritual peace, maybe reducing time in purgatory, securing salvation for themselves or relatives. And the meaning attached to that payment is profound. It cleanses their soul.
The irony there is just staggering.
It is profound. A peasant suffering extreme material poverty. Rationally, you'd think they'd spend any spare money on necessities like medicine, better tools, more food security. But when the meaning of that money is reframed as the literal key to eternal bliss, the manipulated purpose donating the money overrides that rational economic need for immediate survival.
And the result?
The result is a massive, largely unidirectional transfer of wealth. From the productive, often impoverished classes, straight up to the established elite hierarchy, all driven by the spiritual meaning that's been successfully attached to the financial transaction.
What's equally significant, though, is outcome B, social and political control. Using manipulated meaning simply to maintain the highly unequal status quo.
Yes, it's an unparalleled tool for enforcing rigid social hierarchies and eliminating dissent without the constant costly need for military occupation or overt force.
And how does that work? What doctrines are used?
Well, this is where we analyze specific doctrines designed for systemic social control. Doctrines that preach things like humility, acceptance of one's station in life, even poverty as a spiritual virtue. These serve a profound structural purpose. They convince the lower classes that their suffering, their position at the bottom of the social ladder, it's not a sign of systemic failure or injustice. Instead, it's actually a meaningful, necessary, maybe even spiritually superior part of a grand cosmic plan.
Let's unpack the psychology of that for a second. If poverty is a virtue,
Then the poor gain immense spiritual high ground. This spiritual compensation allows them to manage that crushing cognitive dissonance of their material circumstances. Okay, I'm materially deprived, but I am morally and spiritually superior to those wealthy elites.
it provides a powerful, self-regulating mechanism for social stability.
Absolutely. If you genuinely believe your suffering isn't just meaningful, but maybe even a prerequisite for your eternal reward, you are fundamentally disincentivized from seeking political change or joining a rebellion. Because rebellion itself would, by the elite's definition, be an act of spiritual weakness. You'd be trading your heavenly reward for mere temporary earthly gain.
It effectively prevents the formation of class consciousness, doesn't it?
It cripples it. The lower classes are convinced they're playing a different, ultimately superior game, the spiritual game, where their current position is actually enviable in the long run. So why would they ever organize to fight for more equitable material outcomes when those very outcomes have been framed as morally compromising or spiritually dangerous?
So the summary consequence here is
Yeah.
just massive.
It's massive. People are psychologically persuaded, motivated to endure immense hardship, to dedicate their labor, donate their wealth, fight and die in wars, build vast cathedrals, all for purposes that overwhelmingly serve the material, political, and financial interests of a select ruling elite. Yet they are fundamentally driven by the conviction that they are fulfilling a divine, deeply meaningful purpose for their own eternal benefit. The energy, the will, the resources of the masses are effectively co-opted for the systemic preservation and enrichment of the few.
Wow. Okay. This entire deep dive, it really shows the sheer power of narrative, doesn't it? Whether it's applied constructively for personal healing or systemically for control.
Yeah.
Meaning is the engine of commitment, and controlling the narrative of meaning.
Yeah.
That's controlling human effort, human behavior, maybe even human destiny.
It really forces us to recognize that the human need for significance, for meaning, is also a core vulnerability. When we lack an authentic, self-generated purpose, one that's genuinely rooted in our innate values, we become susceptible to external narratives that rush in to supply that meaning. And those narratives are often meticulously crafted to direct our labor, our wealth, our very lives toward outcomes beneficial to others, not necessarily ourselves.
So the real value here for you, listening to this, is the heightened awareness this understanding can bring. Recognizing the difference between authentic meaning and imposed meaning.
Yes.
That's critical for setting goals that are truly your own. You really have to identify the origin of your commitment to things.
Okay.
Are your major life goals driven by your innate values, your genuine need for community or creativity or family security? Or they may be driven by an externally imposed, manipulated meaning, a meaning designed to serve a system or an elite that you might not even realize you're supporting so strongly.
We really have to critically analyze the narratives we accept, especially those narratives that promise great rewards, often deferred, in exchange for great sacrifice in the present. Ask yourself, are you committing yourself to a purpose, maybe your career path, your investment strategy, your long-term political loyalties, because the meaning attached to it truly aligns with your core, unshakable self? Or is it because that meaning was essentially handed to you, prepackaged by the dominant systems around us, and you've internalized it as your own truth?
That introspection feels like the ultimate takeaway here, and it leads us right into our final provocative thought for you to consider. Given that meaning is the subjective fuel that determines the direction and the resilience of our purpose, and given how effective external systems clearly are at structuring that meaning for their own benefit, consider this. How much of the deep, sustained commitment you feel right now to your current major life goals? How much of that comes from values truly innate to you? And how much might be a narrative structure you've adopted, maybe unconsciously, from the systems and elites around you, a narrative you've perhaps mistaken for your own inner voice?
Something to think about. Until next time.